Forward Base Sawano at Xeno Island by Tactical Cat. Illustrated by Zezus Toby, and a few pieces from Tactical Cat. Episode 2. Oh no. This just in. Local man becomes first to master the new skill, spaghettification. The black hole around which he invented the arcane art has since been renamed in his honor to an apt Fool's Chasm. He has since won multiple Darwin Awards and a Golden Raspberry Award for the unique performance. The newsman on the wall droned on above the bustle below, largely ignored by the crowd at the counter. Yeah, it's easy. Watch. Ka-ching! A brilliant blue thermoknife glinted through the air, steaming as it gave off heat. Those onions wouldn't stand a chance against Japanese laser engineering. Remove the extra layer. She peeled off the outside. Horizontally trim a bit off the top. It was quite decapitated. Trim the root, and a little bit more symmetric without the base. Cut the stem diagonally or horizontally, starting from the white part. Out of a flash of knife play, there were perfect ovals of deep green onions arrayed across the cutting board. And perfect scallions. "Amazing, Angela-san!" cried the audience. "You've got to give us more culinary shows sometime." "Same time tomorrow," she reported cheerfully. "It's sukiyaki for lunch, so don't miss the show if you're on break." She slammed the end of the knife handle into her palm, and the glow shut off. The others filed out, and she threw the onion slivers into a container. Slouching onto a stool at the end of the cabinet, she sighed and leaned back. Finally, it was clearing out. There would be another hour of cleaning, but Nishi and I could handle most of it. The lo-fi beeped on in the background as the quiet clink of utensils scraped away at the back of the hall. Sitting across from Toby, whose attention was buried in the Sagittarius news, Yuki sent her a nod and a smirk, a respectful acknowledgement of a well-delivered meal. As she rested a moment in the quiet, Angela wondered when the next staff meeting would be called. As per the Admiral's last instructions, she was to do this job with dedication and passion. In other words, be completely normal. But she didn't believe that was the full truth of the matter. Make those cool dishes of yours, practice with the knives, listen to the rumors going around, and chat with the boys when they come in. What he really wanted was for her team to help retain morale amongst the soldiers. But since it was only lieutenants enough who had any idea what was going on, in reality nothing unusual at all was likely to happen. Her lips parted with a subdued intake, eyes stealing toward the doorway. Radiant like the dawning sun, in walked a tall figure ensconced in flowing layers of the most exquisite frills. Pink alternated upon white. From top to bottom, the dress was an ocean of luxury and refinery. As it passed through the room, the edges of the dress floated with smooth elegance and silent footfalls. The tables became attendants in waiting, and the drab concrete reflected the shine of cloudy white skin. It attracted attention like a fire in the forest at night. "Oh," muttered Lieutenant Angela to herself. Heads turned, all 5 of everyone at lunch anyway. "Oh no," she continued, and reclined further below the edge of the cabinet, admitting no responsibility whatsoever for what might happen next. She could hear from the corner the squeak of a chair sliding across the concrete, and the click of vertebrae turned ahead. There was a quiet, low voice in the air coming from the captain's seats. "Was there a diplomat or some noble assigned to Sawano base recently? The Admiral never mentioned this," commented Yuki, placing down an orange drink with intrigue. She inspected the figure in the dress, and her eyes widened barely to take in the light. Toby nonchalantly absorbed a bite of chicken and pasta, and the other men at the table across kept their heads down. "Remarkable posture," her voice nearly a whisper. "You sound impressed," he commented dryly, very unimpressed. "Huh? She returned to focusing on her pasta. "Never mind." She couldn't help but wonder who that girl was. Anyway," continued Toby suspiciously, "listen to this report from the Sagittarius news. Apparently, they figured out the technique for spaghettification. Some scientist or other who went mad from grant writing. He clicked a button at the top of the translucent screen, and the voice volume increased steadily until they could hear a newsman's casting. "Huh?" interjected Yuki. "Wasn't that Sten's cousin?" Back at the docks, work had been progressing on schedule. "Yeah, Senior Chief Annie assigned me to the late shift since I was in late for the last 2 days," John described to his teammates. "I'll be up for a while." He yawned, just thinking about the dark hours which he had doomed himself to spending with the eccentric night shift. "At least the job's almost done," continued he. "We got most of the plating separated, so we're supposed to join Ensign Era's team on the XLTT." As John pointed, Smith, Jane, and Doe, the other mechanics on Annie's team, took a hesitant glance at the wreck that was the XLTT. Propped up on nothing but the edge of the dock, what had been the XLTT was now 2 separate halves of a battleship floating in the maintenance bay. Reportedly, its captain had arrived in proud spirits, making declarations about heroism on the way. "I don't think that's a repair job," observed Smith cautiously. "That's a straight-up party," announced Jane. "Yeah, says the one who doesn't have to sleep on the thing," responded John dejectedly. "It's an eyesore." What is its captaincy, he thought to himself, to be proud of that wreck? "It doesn't matter what it looks like. She did her job and brought her men home," said Smith. "It's really impressive that Captain Thulner didn't lose any men on that thing. She deserves our full attention just for that. Now, we should really get back to work before the NCO returns." John headed toward the prow of the Sawano deck jutting out above the dock. At the entryway on the right, there was a brief bustle and shifting of personnel. In strolled a giant of a man, certainly the tallest person on dock. That guy had some mass, but he didn't just give off the bluntness of brute strength. With his shoulder-length hair cascading over gentle, large eyes, he carried himself like a gentleman as well as a soldier, uniform tailored cleanly. At his side there was a young kid, also dressed in purple, who kept his face in a manga. He made little noise as he accompanied the taller captain, shying away from eye contact. His darker hair shadowed his face. He seemed to be avoiding attention. John's team stood and saluted. 2 purple shirts had appeared at the dock today, each contrasting dissonantly with the other, except for the uniformity of the captain's dress. They were probably here to check the damage reports. "Please, back to work, everybody. We are just here to watch," said the tall one. But of a sudden, the captain's eyes gaped open. John heard a sharp gasp and a loud creak from behind him. He wheeled around on a point. The clang of heavy bootfalls resounded across the dock. "Get back!" yelled the tall captain, rushing forward toward John's team. "Ken!" the captain explained. The young boy slammed his book shut with a vigorous nod. A thick metal slab plummeted down toward where John was standing from the hole above. "Everything okay?" John peeked his eyes open. Above him, he found himself staring at the ceiling, and beside him hovered the child captain's inquisitive face. He sat up. Apparently, the boy had tackled him to safety as the outer metal plating fell off the hull of the Sawano. Across the other side of the prow, John noticed Senior Chief Annie clambering up next to the tall captain, who was standing beneath a plate from the hull. He had caught it out of the air before it crashed on top of someone. If the captains hadn't acted then, there would have been casualties to report. "It's Thulner-san," cried a bystander, recognizing the familiar face of the tall captain. Plate in hand, Thulner sighed out the adrenaline and placed down the metal sheet onto the dock, just beneath the prow where it was out of the way. "Still dangerous as usual, Yuki-san," Thulner chuckled. "Ain't it good to be back?" While the jaws of the crowd were being dragged back up to the maxilla where they belonged, Thulner made his way toward where Ken had run into John. "All right over here, Ken?" Ken nodded without looking up from his open book. "Nicely done," Thulner complimented. John couldn't help but stare. He knew the captains were impressive, but that was sheer heroism. So strong, he drooled to himself. He really needed to double up on his training efforts. Thulner. Local word for something, wasn't it? A sort of honorary nickname based on extraordinary heroism? So that's why they call you shield bearer, commented Senior Chief Annie, brushing the dirt from her pants. Thanks for the save, sir. Nothing to it, replied Thulner, always happy to lend his strength. Someone told him this would not be the last time either. You too, Captain Kin, continued Annie. Kin vocalized in acknowledgement, hiding his face with a book. Wouldn't be able to start work on the XLTT without John here, Annie continued. Anyway, Captain Thulner, anything we can do for you? What brings you to the dock today, except for some weightlifting? Of course. Annie had learned her basic engineering skills under Captain Thulner when they all still served at Sawano Base. The top mechanics were part of his team at one point. No wonder everyone at the docks recognized him. I was just coming in to check the estimates for my ship, Thulner replied. See how long she'll be out of commission. But after all this, it looks like there's going to be more to handle. What's up with the armor plating? Hazardous leaving a thing like that hanging around? Accidents happened, of course, but something like this bordered on reckless, even negligent. It didn't sound at all like the elite team he knew worked here. Thulner walked over to the edge of the slab. He observed, brows furrowed. It was green. The edges of the plate were slimed an intermediate puke green, and it was moving like a cauldron concoction. The stench was about to destroy his nose. Nobody near that thing, he announced, backing away and waving his arms. It's going straight to Stin's AZ division. It was also dripping a hole through the dock as he spoke. What the hell is it? Asked Annie. Never seen material like this. It's not part of the alloy in the Sonaso fan, that's for sure. Hey! Shouted the always excited Jane from behind. Did that thing sabotage our project? Playing with corrosives isn't funny. Sabotage? Now that was an interesting suggestion. The Admiral and captains would have to know about this. It seemed unlikely that the lasers they had faced the whole way back could have carried enough material on them to deposit something like this. There was tech at work here that none of them understood. Seaman John, was it? Thulner turned to him. Call up the AZ division and get Stin's people down here. Ken, let's head in. The Admiral should hear about this. Yuki, too.